I was still recovering in a hospital bed after a heart attack when my phone rang in the dead of night. My daughter's voice, once warm, was now ice cold. I'm getting married. The apartment and the car are sold. Bye. That betrayal hit harder than the heart attack itself. But I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just laughed because she had no idea the apartment sale was my carefully laid trap. For 15 years since my wife's death, I had built my life around protecting her, never imagining she'd become the perfect target for a man like Leo Morrison, a predator in a tailored suit. She thought she was free. She didn't know I was just getting started. Before we begin, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more profound stories. The antiseptic smell clung to every breath, mixing with the faint beeping of the heart monitor at my bedside. 2 days earlier, I'd collapsed in my kitchen, the crushing weight in my chest, convincing me that my time might finally be up. Now in the middle of the night, still tethered to IV lines, I reached for the phone with trembling fingers. Dad, it's me. Mary's voice should have been a lifeline, a comfort. Instead, it was laced with something cold, transactional. I'm getting married tomorrow. The apartment and the car are sold. Bye. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. I struggled to sit up, the monitor's beeping quickening in sync with my pulse. Married tomorrow, sold the apartment, sold the car. These weren't just possessions. The apartment was the home I'd bought for her security. The car was my gift for her college graduation. Both had been tokens of a father's promise to his only daughter. And now, without so much as a conversation, she was telling me they were gone, liquidated, to fund a whirlwind wedding in Las Vegas. I expected the anger to erupt, the kind that makes your voice shake. Instead, I found myself laughing low and quiet. Not because it was funny, but because Mary had no idea. That apartment sale wasn't hers to make. Years ago, I'd put the property in the Dale Rivera Family Trust, with her listed as beneficiary, but not as owner. She could live there for as long as she wanted, but selling it without my written consent, legally impossible. She didn't know that, and clearly neither did the man who now held her loyalty. Leo Morrison. I'd only met him once, but it was enough to recognize the type. Well-dressed, smooth-talking, the kind of man who could slip into someone's life and rearrange their priorities in weeks. My years in corporate law had trained me to read contracts, but more importantly, to read people. Leo's eyes had measured me the way a predator sizes up a threat. And now, from the sound of it, he thought he'd won. Fine, I said into the phone, my voice steady. But you forgot one thing. There was a pause on the line, the faint edge of irritation in her tone when she asked, "What do you mean I didn't answer directly?" Some battles require silence until the moment is right. You'll find out soon enough. Good luck with your wedding, sweetheart. I hung up before she could respond. The room was quiet again, save for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. I reached for the framed photograph on the bedside table, Mary at her college graduation, standing between me and the fading memory of her mother. Back then, her smile was unguarded, her arm looped through mine as if I were the one constant in her world. I'd kept my promise to her mother all these years, through every sacrifice and sleepless night. And now, with one phone call, Mary had unknowingly set the stage for the most important case of my life. One that would test every skill I'd ever honed. The antiseptic tang still lingered in my nostrils as I lay back trying to steady my breathing. The heart monitor kept its steady rhythm, but my thoughts were anything but calm. Mary's words replayed in my head, each syllable sharper than the chest pains that had brought me here. And then came the deeper ache, not from arteries or muscles, but from the part of me that had built its entire existence around protecting her. 15 years. That's how long it had been since Sarah passed. Cancer had taken her, swiftly leaving me with a teenage daughter who looked at me with tearful eyes and clung to me as though I was the last solid thing in a crumbling world. I'd promised Sarah on her deathbed that Mary would never want for anything. It wasn't just words, it became my creed. I worked late nights, sacrificed promotions that required travel, and funneled every ounce of my energy into being both father and mother. When Mary was accepted into college, I wrote tuition checks that gutted my retirement savings. I didn't care. Watching her walk across that graduation stage, diploma in hand, was worth more than any investment portfolio. I gave her a car new, safe, reliable, because I wanted her to navigate the world without fear of breaking down on some dark highway. And 5 years ago, after months of searching safe neighborhoods and inspecting properties, I handed her the keys to a sunlit apartment. I remember her spinning in the empty living room, arms out, the joy in her laugh echoing off the bare walls. She'd said, "I can't believe this is really mine." I'd smiled, knowing the truth. Legally, it wasn't hers, but it was for her. I'd placed it in the family trust to protect her from unforeseen disasters, from unscrupulous people, from anyone who might see her as a payday rather than a person. Then 8 months ago, she'd mentioned Leo Morrison over Sunday dinner. "I've met someone special." "Dad," she'd said, her voice bubbling with excitement. I'd wanted to be happy for her. I'd even tried. But when I met him, tall, impeccably dressed, and carrying himself with the easy charm of someone who had spent a lifetime selling himself, I felt something shift. He asked all the right questions, said all the right things. But his interest wasn't in Mary's heart. It was in her lifestyle. The apartment, the car, the comfortable way she lived without financial strain. It didn't take long for subtle changes to appear. Our Sunday dinners became hurried coffee meetings. Her laughter, once frequent, became rare. Phone calls shortened. And when I did see her, she was quick to defend Leo whenever I asked about him. 2 months ago, she'd accused me of being too controlling, of keeping her dependent. Those words hadn't come from Mary, they'd come from him. Now, lying in that hospital bed, I realized the truth. My daughter wasn't just in love. She was ensnared. And if I didn't act, she'd lose more than an apartment or a car. She'd lose herself. The night I first met Leo Morrison is etched into my memory like a deposition transcript I'd read 100 times. Mary had invited me to Bella Vista, her favorite Italian restaurant, the same place where we'd celebrated her college acceptance. I walked in, expecting the warm familiarity of those earlier nights. Instead, I found her seated at our old corner booth, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months, with a man I'd never met. "Dad, this is Leo Morrison," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. He stood, extended a hand, and gave me a smile that was almost too perfect. His handshake was firm, but lingered just a beat too long, his eyes scanning my face like he was memorizing it. "Mr. Rivera, Mary's told me so much about you, the successful attorney who raised an amazing daughter single-handedly." I forced a polite smile. "Please call me Dale." "And Mary did most of the work herself." Leo chuckled in that smooth, measured way salesmen do when they're about to pivot. "Modest and wise? I can see where Mary gets her best qualities." She beamed at him, reaching for his hand across the table. The waiter arrived, and Leo took charge of the wine list. He ordered an expensive bottle without hesitation, an odd move for someone who, as I would soon notice, was relieved when I picked up the check at the end of the night. His Rolex caught the candlelight, glinting like a lure, and his suit was tailored shoes, Italian leather. It was a performance of wealth, and yet the details didn't align. His consulting job was vague, with no specifics about clients or industry. "What exactly do you consult on?" I asked, my voice casual but deliberate. "I help people optimize opportunities, Strategic planning, you might say. Before I could probe further, Mary jumped in. Leo's being modest, he's brilliant with investments. I let it go for the moment. But a thread had been pulled. As the meal continued, Leo made an offhand remark that set off every alarm bell I had. "You've been almost too generous, Dale. Some people might take advantage of that." It was framed like a compliment, but his eyes weren't on me, they were on Mary's mention of the apartment. He commented on how beautiful it was, how smart the investment had been. I kept my tone even, but my mind was already cataloging the signs. When we stepped into the parking lot afterward, I noticed his car, a BMW that easily cost more than most people's annual salary. The license plate number I made a point to remember. Driving home, my instincts from 3 decades in corporate law were screaming. The man was too polished, too rehearsed, too interested in the assets that surrounded my daughter's life. He wasn't just courting Mary, he was appraising her. The heart attack had been a shock, but as I lay in that sterile hospital room, I realized it was nothing compared to what was brewing outside. The beeping monitor reminded me I was still alive, and that meant I still had work to do. Leo thought the apartment sale was a clean win. Mary thought she'd taken a bold step toward independence, but neither of them understood the structure I'd put in place years ago. The day I bought that apartment, I'd spent hours in my office drafting the trust documents myself. The Dale Rivera Family Trust listed Mary as beneficiary, but left ownership with the trust under my control as trustee. It was an estate planning tactic I'd used for clients countless times, protecting property from creditors' lawsuits, and in this case, my daughter's own potential missteps. She could live there for decades, but she could never sell it without my written consent. That clause had been designed to shield her from predators, and now it was about to do exactly that. When I got home from the hospital, I moved slowly at first, checking the mail, unpacking medications. But by noon, the dining room table was covered in manila folders, legal pads, and my laptop. I pulled the original trust paperwork from my fireproof cabinet, along with the title, insurance policies, correspondence with the escrow company, and bank records for the purchase. Every piece of evidence was methodically arranged, just as I had done in hundreds of cases. Only this time, the client was my own blood. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Marcus Porter Investigations. Marcus, it's Dale Rivera. I need a complete background check on someone. This is personal, and I'll cover whatever it costs. There was a pause on the other end, then a chuckle. Haven't heard from you in a while, Dale? Who are we looking at? I gave him Leo's full name, the BMW license plate, and Mary's address where Leo had been spending his time. Marcus, a former police detective turned private investigator, didn't waste time with unnecessary questions. Preliminary report in 48 hours. Full workup in a week. My rates haven't changed. Good. I want employment history, financial records, previous relationships, legal troubles, everything. 2 days later, Marcus called back. You're not going to like this. My grip tightened on the phone. Tell me. Employment history is sketchy. Claims to work in consulting but no verified clients. Lives in a luxury complex he can't afford. BMW is financed to the hilt. And here's the kicker, there's a pattern. What kind of pattern? 3 women in the last 5 years. All relationships ended around the time their finances went sideways. 2 filed restraining orders, 1 moved across the country. Credit issues, unauthorized withdrawals, drained savings, nothing that stuck in court. But the trail is there. I hung up staring at the trust documents spread across the table. Mary thought she'd given Leo exactly what he wanted. She had no idea she'd handed him nothing but air and me the upper hand. Marcus's voice still echoed in my ears long after the call ended. A pattern. That was the word he'd used. And in my line of work, patterns meant predictability. Predictability meant leverage. If Leo had done this before, he would do it again, and now he'd made the mistake of choosing the wrong family to prey on. I poured myself a cup of coffee, letting the familiar bitterness ground me as I began pulling threads. I ran Leo's name through every legal database I still had access to. The results confirmed Marcus's report, 3 women each meeting the same grim fate. Short courtships, whirlwind romance, joint accounts, business opportunities that drained savings, then abrupt exits. In 2 cases, restraining orders were filed and quietly dropped. In the third, the woman had relocated, entirely vanishing from her old life. I called Marcus back. "I want names, dates, and current contact information." "Already working on it," he said. "One of them, Jennifer Walsh, still lives in California. The other, Amanda Porter, is up in Oregon. Both might talk if they know it's to protect someone else." Protect. That word had carried me through raising Mary alone, through every decision that put her needs before my own. And now it was the same instinct that would take Leo apart piece by piece. But I also knew how dangerous this would get. Men like Leo weren't just after money, they were after control. Once they sensed it slipping, they could turn volatile. I sat back, staring at the trust documents on the table. Every clause, every line, every signature was exactly where it needed to be. Leo could huff and puff all he wanted, but legally he couldn't touch the apartment's equity. What he didn't realize was that the moment the buyers discovered the title defect, they'd be demanding their money back. The sale would collapse, and Leo's big score would evaporate overnight. The real question was how he'd react when he found out. By early evening, I had mapped out the opening moves. Step 1, let Mary know there were legal issues with the sale, just enough to rattle Leo without revealing my full hand. Step 2, establish direct contact with Jennifer and Amanda to secure first-hand accounts. Step 3, involve Richard Maxwell, my former law partner, to ensure every piece of this was airtight before going to law enforcement. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked out my dining room window at the quiet Hillcrest street I'd called home for 20 years. It struck me how peaceful it seemed compared to the war I was about to wage. This wasn't just about getting Mary back. It was about ending Leo's career as a predator for good. I picked up the phone one last time that night and left a message for Richard. "It's Dale. I have a situation. Call me first thing in the morning. We're going to need to be meticulous on this one." When I hung up, the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My pulse was steady, my mind clear. Leo Morrison had no idea, but his countdown had already begun. The next morning, I was sitting at a corner table in Café Luna, the kind of place where the hiss of the espresso machine could mask a difficult conversation. I'd chosen it deliberately neutral ground, public enough to keep tempers in check, but quiet enough that every word would land. I arrived early, spreading the trust documents on the table in neat order. The manila folder sat beside my coffee like a silent weapon. Mary arrived 10 minutes late, wearing an expensive handbag and the confident posture of someone who thought they'd won. The wedding ring on her finger caught the light, glinting almost defiantly. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm here to tell you to stop interfering in my life. Leo and I are married now." I leaned back, keeping my voice calm. "Married. Then we have some legal matters to discuss, specifically about the apartment sale." Her jaw tightened. "There are no legal matters. Everything's been handled properly." The tone was pure Leo, sharp, dismissive, rehearsed. I slid the first document across the table. "This is the original purchase record from 5 years ago. Notice the ownership structure here, beneficiary versus trustee. You'll see your name under beneficiary, not owner." She glanced down, barely skimming the page. I don't care about old paperwork. I sold it. It's done. I pointed to the next section, my voice even but firm. You can live there as long as you like, but you cannot sell it without my written consent. The property is held in the Dale Rivera Family Trust. That sale you completed legally void. For the first time, I saw her confidence waver. That's impossible. I have the deed. You have a beneficiary document, not an ownership deed. There's a significant legal difference. I opened the folder wider, revealing title insurance records, trust establishment papers, and bank statements from the purchase. The buyers will discover the defect in weeks. Their lawyers will demand their money back. Escrow will reverse the transaction. Mary's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, but her voice tried to stay steady. Leo checked all the paperwork. Leo isn't a lawyer. He wouldn't recognize a trust structure if it was stamped on his forehead. This arrangement is perfectly legal, and I set it up to protect you. Her phone buzzed on the table, the screen flashing Leo's name. She looked at it quickly, then back at me. He says you've been manipulating me my whole life. I didn't take the bait. Leo says a lot of things. Has he ever shown you a client contract, a tax return, anything to prove his consulting business exists? That's none of your business. Everything about Leo Morrison is my business now. I said quietly, the professional mask slipping just enough to let her see the steel underneath. You gave a stranger access to what he thought was $500,000 in real estate equity. That makes him my problem. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. I won't let you destroy my marriage. I gathered the papers calmly. I don't have to destroy anything, Mary. Leo's already doing that himself. I watched her walk out of the cafe with a rigidity in her shoulders that told me she was clinging to Leo's narrative like a lifeline. The door swung shut behind her, and I was left with the lingering aroma of coffee and the quiet certainty that she was in deeper than she realized. I'd spent decades navigating ego's lies and high-stakes negotiations, but this was different. This wasn't about winning a case. It was about saving my daughter from a man who had perfected the art of dismantling trust. That afternoon, I returned home to find an envelope slipped under my front door. Heavy paper, legal letterhead. I didn't even need to open it to know whose fingerprints were on this. I sliced it open and began to read. The language was aggressive, dripping with faux authority. Cease all harassment of Mr. Morrison's wife. Provide documentation proving legal right to property obtained through manipulation of a vulnerable family member. I read it twice, not because I doubted my understanding, but because the absurdity was almost entertaining. The grammar was sloppy, the legal theory non-existent, and the tone pure amateur. Still, I wasn't going to ignore it. This was Leo's first attempt to fight on my turf, and he'd walked into the wrong arena. I picked up the phone and called Richard Maxwell, my former law partner. Richard, I've got a letter here you'll want to see. It's from someone claiming to represent Leo Morrison. He chuckled. The same Leo who thinks he's above property law. Fax it over. 10 minutes later, Richard called back, his laughter even louder. Dale, this guy must have gotten his law degree out of a cereal box. Your trust is bulletproof. 5 years old, established while you were still practicing, properly notarized title insurance in place. There's not a shred of vulnerability here. I'm going to respond, I said, already pulling a blank sheet of letterhead from my desk drawer. Do it with precision, Richard advised. And let him know you're not just defending yourself, you're prepared to go on offense. That's exactly what I did. My response wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a surgical dismantling. I cited case law-attached copies of the trust documents, bank records, and title policies. But I saved the sharpest blade for the end. Be advised that any further frivolous legal action will result in a full investigation into Mr. Morrison's financial history, prior relationships, and documented patterns of predatory behavior. Preliminary findings already suggest matters of interest to law enforcement. By the time I signed my name, the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a warning. It was a promise. I sealed the envelope and leaned back in my chair. Leo had made his opening move, but it was sloppy, rushed. He didn't understand that I'd been doing this for 30 years. In my world, cases weren't won by shouting. They were won by patience, preparation, and timing. And right now, I was content to let him think he'd rattled me. The truth was, I'd just placed my first piece on the board. 2 days after I sent my response, Marcus called with the kind of tone that meant I should be sitting down. "Dale, you might want to clear your schedule. I've got more on Leo Morrison." I pulled a legal pad toward me. "Go ahead. Turns out it's worse than the 3 women I told you about. I found 2 more, 5 in total over the past 8 years. All fit the same profile, older than him, or financially secure, often with some emotional vulnerability. Each relationship ended with financial damage to the woman, sometimes catastrophic. 2 filed restraining orders, 3 filed civil suits that were settled quietly. 1 had to declare bankruptcy." The pen in my hand paused mid-note. Names Marcus rattled them off, and I wrote each one with slow precision. "These women willing to talk, I've already spoken to 2, Jennifer Walsh and Amanda Porter. They both want Leo stopped, and they're willing to testify if it comes to that." "Good. Get me their statements, dates, and financial documentation. I want a complete timeline on each case." By late afternoon, my dining room table looked like the command center of a major investigation. Marriage certificates, bank statements, property records, and sworn statements were spread in tidy rows. The patterns were undeniable: whirlwind romance, joint accounts within months, sudden business opportunities requiring urgent capital, and then the inevitable drain of funds, followed by Leo disappearing. That night, I called Mary. "We need to meet. I have information about Leo that changes everything." Her sigh was audible over the phone. "More legal attacks. I'm tired of this war you've started." "This isn't about law," I said. "It's about his history, his previous marriages." Silence. "Then Leo was never married before." 1 hour. Café Luna. Bring an open mind. She showed up, reluctantly sliding into the same seat she'd occupied during our last meeting. I placed the manila folder between us and opened it slowly. "Mary, this isn't hearsay. These are official documents." The first page was a marriage certificate, Amanda Porter and Leo Morrison, March 2018. Mary barely looked at it before shaking her head. "Fake. You had someone create this." I slid the second one forward, Jennifer Walsh and Leo Morrison, June 2020. Her hands tightened on the edge of the table. "That's impossible. Leo told me I was his first serious relationship since college." Read Amanda's statement. She took the page reluctantly, scanning the lines. As she read, her expression shifted from disbelief to recognition to something closer to fear. He said these exact words to me, almost word for word. Now read Jennifer's account. This time she pushed the paper away before finishing. "No, this isn't real. It's real, Mary. And it's exactly what he's doing to you." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I'm not his wife. I'm his 3rd victim." I didn't say anything. She needed to hear herself admit it before she could believe it. Mary sat frozen, staring at the documents like they were written in a language she didn't want to learn. Her fingers drummed against the table, the small, erratic rhythm of someone trying to keep control, while the ground shifted beneath them. I let the silence work. In court, silence often speaks louder than any cross-examination. Finally, she said, "Leo will have an explanation. He always does. Yes, I replied. And it will sound convincing just like it did to Amanda and Jennifer. And before them to the other 3 women who thought they were different. Her eyes snapped up to mine. There are more, I nodded, sliding forward a neatly organized packet Marcus had compiled. 5 in total over 8 years. Same playbook every time. They all believed they were special. They all believed they were his forever. And they all lost money, property, and in some cases, years of their lives. Mary's gaze dropped to the pages. Bank statements showed large withdrawals timed perfectly with Leo's so-called business opportunities. Photos of properties that had been sold under pressure. Screenshots of affectionate text messages identical in tone and wording across multiple relationships. She pushed the packet back toward me, shaking her head. Even if it's true, it doesn't mean he doesn't love me. That's what they all said too, I said softly, until they were left with nothing. Her phone buzzed again. Leo's name lit up the screen. She silenced it, but I noticed her grip tighten as if just seeing his name could anchor her to his version of reality. You're going to have to decide whose voice you trust, I said. Mine or the man who's made a career out of convincing women to ignore every red flag. Mary looked away out the window toward the street. I could almost see the battle happening in her mind. Leo had likely spent months weaving himself into her thoughts, reframing every concern I'd raised as control, every protective instinct as manipulation. I need time, she said finally. You don't have much, I replied. Marcus thinks Leo's already making moves, large cash withdrawals, possible travel bookings. That's exactly how he disappears. Her brow furrowed. Disappears? It's his exit strategy. When pressure builds, he takes whatever he can and vanishes. Amanda lost $180,000 that way. Jennifer lost $250,000 and a rental property. She stared at the table, her knuckles white. And you think he'll do that to me? I don't think, Mary. I know. The only question is whether we stop him before it happens. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stood her chair, scraping softly against the floor. I'll think about it. I didn't try to stop her. Pushing too hard now would only drive her back into his arms. Instead, I gathered the documents, sliding them back into the manila folder. The case against Leo was strong, but convincing the jury of one, my own daughter, was proving to be the hardest trial of my life. 3 days passed without a word from Mary. I told myself to be patient, but patience is a thin blanket against the chill of knowing your daughter is in the hands of a predator. I kept working, refining the case file until it was airtight, every document labeled, every witness statement, cross-referenced, every timeline precise down to the hour. On the 4th morning, Marcus called. He's moving Dale. Leo's making larger withdrawals, cash only. He's also been spotted at a travel agency downtown. That's not his style unless he's covering his tracks. How much time do we have? I asked. 48 hours, maybe less. I thanked him and hung up my mind, already shifting from preparation to execution. It was time to involve every ally I had. I called Richard first. We're past the point of letters. I want to initiate formal action: fraud, theft, conspiracy. If we get him in custody, it'll buy us time. Richard didn't hesitate. Send me the complete file. I'll make some calls to the district attorney's office today. Next, I reached out to Jennifer Walsh. She answered on the first ring. If you need me to testify, I'm in, she said without preamble. I might need more than testimony, I replied. You're credible, articulate, and you've lived this. If Mary hears your story from you, not from me, it might cut through Leo's manipulation. Jennifer didn't miss a beat. Name the place. By mid-afternoon, Amanda Porter had agreed to join her. The 2 women were willing to face Leo in person, if it meant saving someone else from the same fate. The plan was simple in structure, but risky in execution. Confront Leo and Mary, together with irrefutable evidence, witnesses present, and law enforcement ready to step in. I coordinated with Marcus to have officers on standby, armed with the warrants. Richard's contacts were rushing through the system. That night, I sat alone in my study, the manila folder in front of me like a loaded weapon. This wasn't just about stopping Leo's theft, it was about ending his cycle entirely. If we succeeded, he'd face criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions, with victims testifying against him in open court. But there was another layer, a personal one I couldn't shake. I wanted Mary to look at him and see the truth with her own eyes. I didn't want her to just escape him. I wanted her to reject him. I closed my eyes, replaying our last conversation at Café Luna. The way she'd clung to his defense. The way his name on her phone seemed to tether her to him like a chain. Breaking that bond would be the hardest part. The following morning, Marcus confirmed the warrants were signed. "We're a go," he said. "Tell your people to be ready. If Leo's planning to vanish, tomorrow's the day we stop him." I hung up and stared at the folder one last time before sliding it into my briefcase. This was no longer just a case file. It was the blueprint for ending Leo Morrison's career as a predator. And tomorrow, the real confrontation would begin. The Chapel of Eternal Love sat wedged between a pawn shop and a neon-lit diner, the kind of place that thrived on rushed decisions and bad judgment. Marcus had tracked Leo and Mary here through a series of credit card charges, dress rental, last-minute floral arrangements, a premium ceremony package. It reeked of desperation, and desperation was exactly what I was counting on. I arrived early, dressed in a dark suit that blended into the shadows near the chapel's rear entrance. The manila folder was tucked under my arm, like a briefcase full of closing arguments. Jennifer Walsh and Amanda Porter waited in a rented sedan across the street, ready to enter on my signal. Two plainclothes officers lingered nearby, pretending to be tourists, but keeping their eyes locked on the front doors. Inside, the air was thick with artificial romance, plastic flowers, velvet drapes, and a faint scent of cheap cologne. About 20 guests milled about, mostly Leo's so-called business associates. They greeted each other with shallow smiles, oblivious to the fact they were minutes away from watching a public demolition. I stayed near the back, watching as Mary entered in a white gown that looked like it had been chosen in a hurry. She was beautiful, but there was a hollowness in her eyes, a glassy distance that made my chest tighten. Leo stood at the altar in a tailored suit, grinning like a man who believed the finish line was in sight. The officiant cleared his throat. "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." That was my cue. I stepped into the aisle, the sound of my shoes on the tile drawing every eye in the room. "I have a reason," I said, my voice carrying the same calm authority I'd used in court for decades. "And the bride deserves to hear it before making a life-altering mistake." Leo's smile faltered. "This is a private ceremony. You weren't invited. I wasn't invited to Amanda Porter's wedding either, or Jennifer Walsh's. But Leo here was the groom in both." Gasps rippled through the crowd as I walked forward, pulling the first marriage certificate from my folder and placing it on the altar. Amanda Porter married to Leo Morrison, March 2018. Leo lunged toward the paper, but I sidestepped him with practiced ease. "And here's the second, Jennifer Walsh, June 2020. Mary's bouquet trembled in her hands. "Leo, you said these marriages never happened." "They didn't." He snapped his charm, cracking. "He's lying." I looked past him to Mary. "Read the statements, sweetheart. See if anything sounds familiar." She took the pages with shaking hands. her eyes darting between the words and Leo's face. With each sentence, her posture stiffened, the glassy look in her eyes giving way to something sharper: recognition. Leo reached for her arm. "We can leave right now. Start fresh somewhere else." Mary didn't move. She was still reading. Mary's grip on the papers tightened as she reached the end of Jennifer's statement. Her lips parted slightly like she was about to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she set the pages down on the altar, her hands trembling. "You told me I was your first real love," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo forced a smile, the kind meant to charm his way through an interrogation. "You are. These women meant nothing to me. They're bitter jealous." "Then why?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Did you say to them the exact same things you said to me, word for word?" His eyes flickered just for a second, and I saw the mask begin to slip. He laughed, a thin, hollow sound. "Coincidence, they're twisting things." Twisting, I stepped forward, placing bank statements beside the marriage certificates. Amanda lost $180,000. Jennifer lost $250,000 and her rental property. Both within 18 months of meeting you, and both were told about a business opportunity that required immediate funding. Sound familiar? A murmur spread through the small crowd. Leo's business associates began exchanging uneasy glances, the kind that said they just realized they didn't know him at all. Mary's gaze dropped to the bank statements. "These are the exact amounts I transferred into our joint account last month," she said slowly. Leo's smile was gone now, replaced by a sharp edge. "They're lying. All of them. Your father paid them to destroy us." I didn't look away from him. "The difference between me and you, Leo, is that I have documentation, witnesses, and the law on my side. You have a pattern, a reputation, and a list of victims long enough to fill a courtroom." Mary's breathing quickened. She stepped back from him, the space between them suddenly wide and cold. "Is any of it real?" she asked. "Anything you ever said to me?" "Of course it's real," he insisted, his voice softening in a practiced shift. "I love you. That's why we're here." She reached for her left hand, slid the wedding ring off, and stared at it for a long moment before setting it on the altar. "We're not married yet, Leo. And after today, we won't be." The crowd was silent except for the shuffling of feet as a few guests quietly backed toward the exit. Leo turned on me, then eyes hard. "You think you've won, old man. This isn't over." I met his glare evenly. "For you, Leo, it's just beginning." Mary stepped away from the altar, her gown brushing the aisle as she walked toward me. For the first time in months, her eyes looked clear. She didn't say a word, but she didn't have to. She'd made her choice. We left the chapel together, the late afternoon Las Vegas sun glaring down on us like a spotlight. Mary didn't speak, but I could feel the weight of her silence. It wasn't anger anymore. It was the slow processing of betrayal. Behind us, voices rose in the chapel, Leo's sharp tone cutting through the hum of startled guests. Jennifer and Amanda were waiting just outside, leaning against the rented sedan. Jennifer straightened when she saw Mary, her expression not one of pity, but of understanding. "He did the same to me," she said simply. Mary hesitated, her fingers clutching the folds of her gown. "He said you lied. That you were bitter." Amanda stepped forward, her voice steady. "I was bitter. Bitter that I lost my savings, my home, and nearly my sanity to a man who made me believe I was his whole world. But none of it was a lie." Mary's eyes moved between them, searching for some crack, some inconsistency she could cling to. Instead, she saw the same pain she was feeling reflected back at her twice over. I let the moment hang before opening my briefcase. "Mary, you need to see this while you still have the clarity to understand it." I handed her a folder containing Marcus's compiled report, financial timelines, travel records, photos of Leo with each woman during the height of his courtship. She flipped through it slowly, her face tightening with each page. This trip to Napa, he said it was spontaneous, just for us. Jennifer nodded grimly. He took me there too. Same hotel, same winery tour. I thought I was special. Amanda added, so did I. Mary stopped on a page showing an annotated bank statement, large deposits from her account, into Leo's withdrawals in cash within days, just as he'd done before. This was never about me, she whispered. No, I said softly. It was about what you had. She closed the folder and handed it back to me with hands that no longer shook. What happens now? I glanced toward the chapel. Now Marcus contacts the DA. With 3 of you willing to testify and this much documentation, we can move quickly. But we have to be careful. Men like Leo don't go quietly. Jennifer's voice was cool but resolute. Then we don't give him the choice. Amanda looked at Mary. It's not just about punishing him. It's about making sure no one else ends up here. Mary straightened, a flicker of resolve replacing the shock in her eyes. Then let's finish this. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a shift, not just in the case, but in Mary. The leash Leo had wrapped around her mind had begun to fray, and once it snapped completely, he wouldn't be able to reach her again. The drive back to San Diego felt longer than usual, but the silence in the car wasn't hostile. It was heavy with thought. Mary sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the desert fading into night. Every so often I'd catch her hand twitch slightly, as if she were resisting the urge to check her phone. I didn't say anything. Part of me knew Leo would be blowing up her messages, alternating between apologies and threats. When we reached my house, I led her into the dining room, the place that had become my war room. The table was still covered with evidence documents, photographs, timelines, all organized with the precision of a trial exhibit. She stood at the edge, taking in the scope of it. This is all about him, she asked quietly. Yes, and all about protecting you. Her eyes moved over the papers, stopping at the side-by-side photos of Leo with Amanda and Jennifer. The settings were different, one at a beach resort, the other in a ski chalet, but the body language was identical. His arms slung just so, the same rehearsed smile, the same look of possession. Mary picked up one of the sworn statements. He told me I was the first woman he'd ever thought about building a future with. I didn't answer. She read for a moment longer, then set the paper down, her mouth tightening. I feel like an idiot. You're not, I said firmly. Leo's a professional. He studies people, learns their weaknesses, and uses them until there's nothing left to take. This isn't about intelligence. It's about trust. Her shoulders slumped slightly, but then she straightened, a flicker of determination in her voice. What's our next move? I walked her through it, step by step. Marcus is coordinating with the district attorney. The warrants will be ready within days. Jennifer and Amanda have agreed to testify, and we'll have financial records, marriage certificates, and your account as well. Once he's in custody, we can push for a multi-victim fraud case. Mary glanced at me, uncertainty in her eyes. And if he tries to spin it, if he says we're all lying, then we bury him in facts so deep he can't dig out. Courtrooms run on evidence, not charm. She nodded, but her hands were clenched at her sides. I want to be there when it happens. You will be, I assured her. That night, as she slept in the guest room, I sat at my desk, finalizing the witness list and reviewing Marcus's surveillance logs. Leo had been seen lingering near Mary's old apartment twice in the past week. That told me 2 things: he was watching, and he wasn't ready to give up. It also told me we had to move faster. If there's one thing I've learned from years of litigation, It's that the moment you corner a desperate man, he'll do anything to break free. And Leo Morrison was about to realize his options had run out. By the next morning, the plan was in motion. Marcus had confirmed that the arrest warrants would be executed within 48 hours, and the district attorney's office had already flagged Leo's financial activity as suspicious with probable cause for seizure. Still, I knew this window was critical. If Leo sensed the walls closing in, he'd vanish. Mary joined me in the dining room as I reviewed the last set of bank statements. She looked different, not entirely free from the weight of betrayal, but steadier, more present. "I've been thinking," she said. "When they arrest him, I want to be there. I need to see it happen with my own eyes." I studied her face, searching for hesitation. "Are you sure it won't be pretty?" She nodded. "I'm sure. If I don't face him now, I'll always wonder if I could have closed that chapter myself." We went over the sequence one more time. Marcus and 2 plainclothes officers would enter first, supported by uniformed backup stationed nearby. Jennifer and Amanda would arrive minutes later to provide immediate witness verification in case Leo tried to spin the situation as a misunderstanding. My job was to bring the complete evidence file organized, cross-referenced, and ready for the DA's office. That afternoon, I called Richard to update him. "The moment Leo's in custody, we file civil claims alongside the criminal charges," I said. "That way, even if his defense tries to negotiate, the financial restitution will already be locked in." Richard's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "With the trust structure in place and the paper trail you've built, he won't have room to maneuver. He's finished." The following day was a waiting game, the kind that tests every ounce of patience you have. Mary paced the living room, her phone in hand, but no longer answering Leo's messages. He'd shifted from pleading to threatening, classic behavior for someone losing control. "He says I'll regret crossing him," she muttered, tossing the phone onto the couch. "Empty words," I said. "It's the last card he has to play." That night I barely slept. Instead, I sat in my office, the briefcase containing the entire case file resting at my feet. Outside, the quiet of my neighborhood felt deceptive, as if the calm was holding its breath for what was coming. When morning broke, the call came from Marcus. "We've got eyes on him. He's at Mary's apartment. Officers are in position. Are you ready?" I looked toward the hallway where Mary stood already dressed, her chin lifted with quiet resolve. "Yeah," I said into the phone. "We're ready." I grabbed the briefcase Mary slipped on her coat, and together we stepped out the front door. The air was crisp, the kind that sharpens your focus. Today wasn't just about ending Leo Morrison's freedom. It was about taking back everything he'd tried to steal. Marcus's unmarked sedan was already parked a block away from Mary's apartment when we arrived. 2 plainclothes officers stood by, blending into the sidewalk traffic, while a third waited inside the building's lobby. Jennifer and Amanda were en route, their arrival timed perfectly, so Leo wouldn't have a chance to slip away or spin a false narrative before the truth hit him from every angle. We walked up the stairs quietly, Marcus leading, his voice low and deliberate. "He's in the kitchen packing. Suitcase is half full. My guess, he was planning to be gone within the hour." Mary's jaw tightened, but she kept moving. When Marcus opened the apartment door with my emergency key, Leo's head snapped up from behind the counter. His eyes darted between me, Mary, and the 2 officers. For a second, I saw calculation flicker across his face, measuring the exits, the odds. "This is harassment," he said quickly, raising his hands in mock innocence. "You can't just barge in here." Leo Morrison, Detective Porter's voice was steady, formal. "You're under arrest for fraud in the first-degree theft and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." The click of the handcuffs was louder than it needed to be, a sound that seemed to drain the air from the room. Leo turned to Mary as if the rest of us weren't there. "You have to believe me. They're lying. Your father's behind all of this." Before Mary could answer, Jennifer and Amanda stepped into the apartment. The color drained from Leo's face. "I married him in 2018, Jennifer said flatly. "He drained my accounts and left me bankrupt." Amanda's voice followed, cold and precise. "He took my home, my savings, and years of my life. You're not the first, Mary, and you wouldn't have been the last." Mary's eyes stayed locked on Leo. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "Were you going to leave me?" Leo's composure cracked, his voice rising. "They're bitter. They're lying to hurt us." Amanda stepped forward, dropping a stack of bank statements on the counter, withdrawals, transfers, and deposits into accounts tied to Leo's aliases. "These aren't lies. They're receipts." Mary glanced at the documents, then back at Leo. "It's over," she said, her voice steady. "You don't get to touch my life ever again." Detective Porter guided him toward the door. Leo shot me one last glare, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, Rivera. This isn't over." I met his gaze without blinking. "For you, Leo, it is." The door shut behind them, and the apartment was suddenly quiet, except for Mary's slow, measured breathing. She turned to Jennifer and Amanda. "Thank you, both of you." Jennifer gave her a small nod. "Just promise me you won't let him back in, no matter what he says." Mary looked at me, then her eyes tired but clear. "I won't." We stayed in Mary's apartment after the arrest, the echo of the door slamming behind Leo still hanging in the air. Marcus collected the stack of evidence from the counter, carefully sealing it into an evidence bag. Jennifer and Amanda sat on the couch, their presence a steady anchor in the storm that had just passed. Mary stood by the window, arms folded, staring down at the street, where the unmarked car waited with Leo inside. Her expression wasn't triumphant. It was weary, like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. "You did the right thing," I told her, stepping closer. She shook her head slightly. "Then why does it feel like I just lost something?" "Because you did," I said gently. "You lost the version of him you thought was real. That's a different kind of grief." Marcus approached, his tone all business. "He's being transported to holding. The DA will want formal statements from all three of you within the next 48 hours. After that, we'll be pushing for no-contact orders." Mary glanced at Jennifer and Amanda. "How did you get through it?" Jennifer spoke first. "By remembering that every time I missed him, I wasn't missing him. I was missing the person I thought he was, the one he pretended to be." Amanda added, "And by keeping busy. Filling your life with things that aren't about him. It's the only way to take back the space he stole." Mary nodded, though her eyes still had that faraway look. I knew it would take time before she could truly let go. Once Marcus left with the evidence, I offered to drive Jennifer and Amanda back to their hotel. Mary insisted on staying behind. "I need to sit here for a while," she said, "in my own space without him in it." On the drive back, Jennifer turned to me. She's stronger than I was at that point. The fact she saw him get taken away, that's going to matter. Amanda agreed. It's closure in real time. Most of us didn't get that. When I returned later that evening, Mary was still in the same spot by the window. But something had changed in her posture. Her shoulders weren't as tense, and her hands were no longer clenched. "I've been thinking," she said. "I want to help the DA. Whatever they need, I'll give it. Statements, testimony, whatever it takes to keep him from doing this again." I felt a quiet surge of pride. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." She turned to face me, her voice steady now. "And Dad, I'm sorry." for not listening, for everything I said to you. I stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace. You have nothing to apologize for. You were being manipulated by someone who makes it his life's work. The important thing is you're free now. She exhaled, and for the first time in months, I heard relief in her breath. The next morning began with a call from Richard. Dale, I've just spoken to the DA. They're moving faster than expected. With Jennifer and Amanda's statements and Mary's cooperation, they're confident they can push this to a grand jury within weeks. That was good news, but I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Leo wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat quietly. Later that day, Marcus stopped by my house with an update. He's already trying to work the system. Called a bail bondsman, reached out to an old contact in Nevada. We're monitoring it all. But here's the thing, his accounts are frozen. Between the civil holds and the fraud investigation, he doesn't have the cash to get out quickly. I leaned back in my chair. So he's cornered. Exactly. Which makes him dangerous. By early afternoon, Mary arrived at my place carrying a small notebook. I wrote down everything I remember from the last 8 months, she said, handing it to me. Conversations, trips, the dates of all the transfers I made into our joint account. I flipped through it, impressed by the detail. This is exactly the kind of evidence that sticks. It shows the pattern, the grooming, the financial manipulation, all in your own words. Mary nodded, but there was a shadow in her expression. I thought writing it down would make me feel better. But it just reminded me how good he was at making me believe I was safe with him. That's why men like him get away with it so long, I said. They make smart, capable people feel like the safest place in the world is the very place they're being robbed from. In the evening, we met with the assistant district attorney in a conference room downtown. Mary told her story in a calm, steady voice, even when the details got personal. Jennifer and Amanda each gave their accounts, and by the end, the ADA was nodding with the satisfaction of someone who knew she had a rock-solid case. This isn't just a fraud case anymore, she said. It's a multi-victim scheme with interstate elements. We're coordinating with federal authorities. Mary's eyebrows lifted. You mean he could face federal charges, and if we win, he'll serve time in a place where his charm won't mean a thing. Walking out of that building, I saw a change in Mary's stride. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was part of the fight to hold him accountable. That night at home, she sat across from me at the kitchen table. Dad, after all this is over, I don't want to just go back to my life like nothing happened. I want to do something with this, help other women spot the signs before it's too late. I smiled faintly. Then we'll make sure this ends with more than just his conviction. It'll end with you turning his worst act into someone else's warning. 2 days later, Marcus called with an update that made my grip on the phone tighten. Leo's defense team is already playing games. They've filed motions to suppress financial records, claiming they were obtained without proper consent. It's a stalling tactic, but it could drag things out. I expected as much. Let them try. Every document came from lawful sources, either public records, bank subpoenas, or the victims themselves. Marcus's voice carried a smirk. Yeah, but they're banking on exhausting you. Men like Leo count on people losing the patience to see it through. Well, I said they've chosen the wrong opponent. That afternoon, Mary came by with a determined look. I've been talking to Jennifer and Amanda, she began. We want to meet other women who might have crossed paths with him. There could be more victims who've stayed silent. It was a bold idea and a good one. I connected them with an advocacy group I'd worked with years ago during a pro bono case. They specialized in financial abuse and had the resources to discreetly reach out through networks Leo might have exploited. That night over coffee at my dining table, the same table that had been my war room for weeks, Mary, Jennifer, and Amanda pored over a list of names Marcus had dug up. Some were ex-girlfriends, others were women who had worked with Leo briefly in business ventures that never materialized. This one, Jennifer said, pointing to a name halfway down the page, was at the same charity gala as us in 2019. Leo introduced her as a close friend. I bet she has a story. Mary leaned back, a flicker of resolve in her eyes. If we can show the court that this wasn't just 5 women, but maybe 8 or 10, it'll bury any argument his lawyer makes about coincidence. The following morning, the DA's office confirmed that Leo's bail hearing had been denied due to the multi-victim nature of the charges and the risk of flight. He'd stay in custody until trial. That bought us precious time to strengthen the case. When Mary heard the news, she didn't smile in triumph. Instead, she exhaled slowly. It's not over, but at least he can't get to anyone else right now. Later that evening, I found her in the living room scrolling through her phone. She was looking at old photos, vacations, dinners, little moments with Leo that had once felt real. She caught me watching and set the phone down. "I'm not doing it to miss him," she said. "I'm doing it to remind myself of the signs I ignored. So next time I see them for what they are." I nodded, recognizing the quiet strength in her voice. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was learning, rebuilding. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt certain that when Leo finally faced judgment, Mary would walk out of that courtroom not as a victim, but as a woman who had taken her life back on her own terms. The day of Leo's preliminary hearing arrived with a sharp chill in the San Diego air. Mary insisted on coming with me, her posture straight, her eyes steady. She wasn't here to hide in the gallery, she wanted him to see her, to know she wasn't afraid anymore. The courthouse hallway buzzed with the usual low hum of attorneys, clerks, and nervous defendants. But when Leo was led in, shackled at the wrists, the noise seemed to fade. His gaze swept the room until it found Mary. He smirked, but there was no real confidence behind it, just the brittle arrogance of a man trying to salvage dignity in front of an audience. Jennifer and Amanda were already seated, their presence a quiet wall of solidarity. When the clerk called the case, the DA laid out the charges in crisp, unforgiving language: multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy, enhanced by a multi-victim pattern of exploitation. Evidence packets were entered into the record, bank statements, marriage certificates, sworn testimony, and the timeline Marcus had so meticulously built. Leo's attorney tried to push back, filing a motion to dismiss based on insufficient proof of intent. The judge barely glanced at him before denying it. "The volume and consistency of the evidence presented leaves little question for this court," she said. "The matter will proceed to trial." Leo's jaw tightened. He glanced at Mary again, perhaps expecting a flicker of hesitation. Instead, she met his stare with a calm that seemed to unsettle him more than any accusation. Outside the courtroom, the DA approached us. "With the testimony of all 3 women plus financial records and corroborating witnesses, this case is strong. He's looking at serious time." Mary's voice was steady. "Good. Because I want him to know every day in there that he didn't win." We stepped out into the sunlight, the courthouse steps stretching ahead. For the first time in months, I felt the heaviness in my chest ease. This wasn't just about stopping Leo anymore. It was about what came after. That evening, we gathered at my house. Jennifer and Amanda stayed for dinner, laughter filling spaces that had been silent for too long. Mary helped me clear the dishes, and when we were alone in the kitchen, she said, "You never gave up on me even when I pushed you away. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't need to," I said. "The fact that you're here standing on your own 2 feet is enough." She smiled faintly, And in that moment, I saw the young woman she'd been before Leo, the one I'd promised her mother I'd protect. Only now, she didn't need my protection in the same way. She'd learned to protect herself. As the night wound down, I knew the fight wasn't over. Trials are long, and defense attorneys are persistent. But whatever lay ahead, Mary was no longer Leo's victim, and I was no longer fighting alone. Looking back, I realized this fight was never just about stopping Leo. It was about reclaiming the truth, trust, and dignity he tried to strip away. Mary learned that love without respect is just manipulation in disguise. And I learned that protecting someone sometimes means letting them see the danger for themselves. For anyone who's ever been gaslit or betrayed by those closest to them, remember, silence helps the predator, but truth exposes them. Have you ever faced someone who tried to control you under the guise of love? How did you break free? If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.